Recording and
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
hello and welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. Shortly I'm going to be handing you over to Susie and Neil, who are going to be giving a presentation on Locality's webinar, on Locality's Keep It Local campaign. I'm just here to facilitate the session. Before we start, I'd like to let you, I've got a little bit of housekeeping to go through, so I'd like to let you know that all the slides that you see on screen today will be emailed out to you after the session, so you don't have to worry about notes. You will get a copy of everything that you see on screen. I'd also like to let you know that throughout the session we're going to be pausing to take a couple of polls. You'll see, when we take the polls, you'll see a screen that pops up, and the way to interact and cast your vote is just click on the option that is most relevant to you. We're also going to be pausing throughout the session for some questions and answers. The way to submit your questions, you can do that anytime while you're listening. If you look to the right hand side of your screen, you'll see a small box, and at the bottom of that box is a section labelled questions. You can just type your questions in there. I'll be monitoring those throughout, and when we pause for questions, I'll be feeding those back to Neil and Susie. So I'm now going to hand over to Susie for the first part of this session. Susie, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Luke. Firstly, welcome everyone. Welcome to this webinar this afternoon from Locality. We're going to be talking a bit about our Keep It Local campaign and how you can get involved. This is an area we've been quite concerned about Locality for a number of years now, the state of our public services and how we can be better at delivering more local public services around the country. Last year, published a campaign, a publication called Saving Money by Doing the Right Thing. And in that we found that 20% of public service activity was actually spent trying to help people. And a shocking actually 80% was what people really would call waste, repeat interventions, because people weren't being helped, assessment, referrals to other organisations, logging, reporting, closing cases, quality control and case review, but very much not helping people. The vast majority of spending on those public services really weren't going to making people's lives better. So this afternoon you'll be hearing from me and from my colleague Neil Berry, and we'll be talking to you about the Keep It Local campaign, key findings of a survey we did earlier this year, really what we'd like to see in terms of better public services around the country, and some examples of some really interesting and innovative public services that are happening at the moment. And also we'll be looking at what you can do to really improve public services in your own area. We're really concerned that actually our public services are quite very key and vital to people's lives, but in many cases they're not working, as that statistic we looked at earlier mentioned. We really need services that are treated as people and not numbers, that are really centred around the needs of local communities and local people, and those very different needs that people will have around the country. We've got some real concerns that actually there's a lot of money being wasted and time in terms of the delivery of our public services. We have obviously, limited resources in this country, and yet we're wasting a lot of time and money and not actually answering the needs of people in the way that we could. And there are much better and different ways that we could actually deliver our public services to make people's lives and communities better. We're concerned actually for many, they've looked at the solution being bigger and better and outsourcing to national companies as a solution to delivering cost-effective public services. We're very concerned that actually outsourcing is making things worse, not better. It's actually spending more money and not actually delivering the personalised public services that people really need. What we want to see is services designed and delivered locally that are better and more cost-effective, that put communities and service users really at the centre of those services, which is why we're campaigning for a better way. In terms of public services, obviously we all rely on public services daily. They're provided by local and national government either directly or by contracting out to others to deliver them for us. So from children's centres to adult social care to libraries to health services to refuge collection, parks and open spaces, benefits and education, really on public services do touch on the lives of everyone in society. We'd really like to know what you think. We're going to open a poll in a moment, and we really want to know overall whether you're happy with how the local public services are run in your area. So I'm switching over to, now we'll be opening a poll, and the poll will be opening in a minute to enable people to vote in terms of, let us know whether what you think in terms of public services in your area, whether you think you are happy with them, you're not happy, or you're not sure.
So the poll's now on. Votes are coming in. So far 69% of people have voted. The majority there have voted on no. I'm going to give people a few more minutes to vote. Not everyone's voted, so just go ahead and click the option that you see on screen that's most relevant to you. I'll give everyone just a few more seconds before I close this down. And it looks like everyone's finished voting, so I'm going to close this down and share the results back there. So 58% of people have said that no, they're not happy with how public services are currently run. 25% of people have said yes, and just 17 people are currently not sure. So I'm now going to hand back to you there, Susie.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Luke. That's really interesting. I will be sort of looking later about how we can do better local public services in people's areas. We're going to go to Neil now, who will be talking through the sort of key findings of some research that we did earlier this year.
Thank you, Susie. Good afternoon, everyone. So we've just had a quick poll in the room there, but we've been doing some other polling recently in the last few months, and also about a year or so ago. So I'm going to share some results from a couple of polls that we have done. The first couple of slides I'm going to show you are from a survey that we commissioned from YouGov, 2,000 just ordinary folk, and asking them about their experience of public services. And some of the findings up on screen there. So a third of people felt that public services overall were not currently meeting their needs. So we've just had the best part of 60% of you feeling that public services weren't working well. So only a third of people felt that public services at the moment weren't meeting their needs, but the majority of people had experienced some sorts of problems. So overall, people generally not at the moment too dissatisfied, but have some problems. But the vast majority of people were fearful for the future of public services as cuts start to bite and services continue to be scaled and outsourced. Vast majority of people fearful for what that would mean for free and accessible and quality public services in the future. Also, vast majority of people, perhaps not surprisingly, agreed with the notion that it's better and cheaper to help people at the early stages of their problems rather than deal with problems once they've escalated. But from our point of view, probably the most encouraging statistic of all in that survey was that a significant majority of people, 72%, agreed with us that public services should be run and delivered exclusively by locally based and accountable organisations and not large private companies. Perhaps the most surprising finding of all was that although our argument is that public services can be delivered better and without them being more expensive by delivering services locally, waste can be cut. So it's not a more expensive option. But actually, if the notion was that people need to pay more to maintain good quality public services, a majority of people said, at least in a survey, that they would support a council tax increase in return for better public services. So those are the findings from earlier this year when we commissioned that survey from YouGov, but we did also a year or so ago do a survey of voluntary and community sector organisations, including parish councils, to identify what their experience was in terms of trying to deliver public services themselves in a local point of view. So just a couple of findings from that as well. Firstly, it showed that a vast majority of organisations that wanted to deliver public services would fail what's called a 25% rule that local authorities and other public bodies sometimes apply when they're determining whether an organisation is of a sufficient size to deliver a particular contract. And what that means is that sometimes local authorities will refuse to contract with an organisation if the contract that they have in mind would be more than 25% of that organisation's overall income or turnover. So it basically means that an organisation shouldn't be trying to deliver a contract that's going to be a significant proportion of their overall income. That's a risk to the local authority as they perceive it. And organisations that were wanting to deliver a contract, because of the size of those contracts they wanted to go for, in the vast majority of cases, organisations were just simply not big enough to deliver at that scale. So evidence that actually that upscaling that we've seen and that we're arguing against is already having a detrimental effect on the ability of small and local organisations to actually deliver contracts that they feel they could deliver well. Second finding from that survey was that 80% of organisations said that that increase in scale that was happening in contracts was already reducing opportunities for them. So a number of findings that show that people would like local services, but also that organisations are finding it difficult to deliver those at the moment. So back over to Susie now to talk about what we think should happen next.
Brilliant, thanks, Neil. We think that obviously there's quite a shift in terms of policy and practice that needs to happen in order to sort of see the sort of public services we like to see. We really do see public service contracts that are built around the needs of local communities, not around the needs of big business to deliver contracts. We also need transparency built into all public service contracts so that people really do know who is delivering their public services, what levels of profits are in there, and who are being utilised as subcontractors in that work. We also really need commissioners to be trained in how to work with the voluntary sector. We really need a big shift in terms of how commissioners are supported and how they engage to work with community organisations. A real sort of root and branch shift in terms of that relationship. And we really also need to see new laws to stop large organisations from being able to run too many government contracts, as well as small local organisations needing to be able to bid for public service contracts. As Neil mentioned, some organisations were too small to be able to actually meet that threshold, and that's something we really think needs to be addressed. And we really want, we've got a real opportunity now with a new government about to be in place in the next just over a week. We've got a real opportunity for the next government to look at how they can make this happen. What we have discovered in our work is some really interesting examples around the country and abroad of where people are delivering better, more local public services. And I'm going to hand over to Neil now, who can talk through a couple of examples of some really interesting work that is happening around the country.
Okay, thanks again, Susie. So we wanted to show you these two case studies, really in case you were in any doubt that delivery at a local level can be better and can be cheaper, and demonstrate really why the kind of counterintuitive truth that that small scale can be more cost effective is really the case. So two case studies to very briefly go through. After the first one, we're going to pause for a quick poll again, and then some questions. before we move on to the second case study. So this first case study, as you can hopefully see on screen, is about grass cutting, cutting verges and basic environmental maintenance. This is a parish council in Buckinghamshire that wanted to take on that role from its local authority. Previously within the local authority, the contract had been delivered centrally in the usual way by gangs of people coming out with expensive kit, travelling around the county with these kind of vans to go out into different communities and manage grass cutting. And that's the way it's normally done in most places, but in Stukely they wanted to try something different, and what they wanted to do was have local people with lower tech kit just managing the verges and the open space in their community. Because it was done very locally, because the kit was low tech, they found a number of things. Firstly, they found that they could do it quicker than the previous arrangements with gangs coming out, and in fact with their team going out and mowing the verges and the open space in the area, they found that by the time they'd finished the job, it was at around about the same point in time that under the old contract the previous gang would have just been arriving in the village to unload the kit off the back of the wagon. So in terms of those kind of inefficiencies of scale, you can kind of understand some of the reasons why, when you've got large distances to travel and you've got kit to load and unload, you've got all those extra transaction costs. But most of the benefits of this new approach came in other ways. They came as a result of the local work experience that they could offer to people to actually carry out this work. Quality went up because quality control was managed very locally, not centrally via a call centre. Basically, quality control was people looking out of their windows and seeing if the grass needed cutting or not, and getting on to the organisation that was managing this and saying, can you get out and mow the grass. Grass could be mowed whenever the sun shone, rather than being scheduled in for a particular date and then not happening because it was tipping down with rain. As a result of all of this, the number of grass cuts went up significantly. The team started to carry out additional work as they were going around with their mowers. They could do other things as well, including picking up litter, painting fences, that kind of thing. So there were added value that they could deliver as well. But at the same time, the contract value had gone down. They were paid less than the old contractors were for that bit of the work. So quality going up, added value being delivered, a number of cuts growing, and the contract value going down because it was done locally and at small scale. So an example there of why local can be better and cheaper. Okay, that's the first case study. We're going to pause now for another poll. And so Luke's going to hopefully bring this poll up on screen that you can vote. But this is a question that we asked our respondents in the YouGov questionnaire about whether people were fearful for public services for the future. So do you worry that in future your local public services may not meet your need? Yes, no, not sure. So if you vote now. Most of you have voted. Yeah, we're up to 80%. Okay, just leave it another few seconds just to see if people that haven't voted yet, give you a chance to vote. We're almost all in. We'll close it in 5 seconds, so last chance for you to vote. Okay, I think we'll call that a wrap. If you could close that now, Luke, and put the results on screen, that would be great. Okay, so as you see, the vast majority of people in this audience are also worried about future of public services. So earlier on, most people seemed to feel that public services were struggling now, but a greater majority worried for the future, as we might imagine. Luke, we've got a chance to have any questions that people have got very briefly, because we need to move on after that, but have we got any questions?
Yeah, We've got a few questions coming. I'll pick out just one for this section. Anne Little's asking, who decides on the needs of the local community, and are there any models in place how best to raise awareness of what needs the community have?
Okay, Susie, feel free to come in at this point as well. I think from my point of view, the starting point for this is that the more local services are designed and delivered, the more chance there is for people to influence local services. There's a lot of emphasis in the public sector on co-design and co-production, and that starts with, you know, identifying users and local suppliers and local communities what the needs are. But a lot of co-design efforts founder because the scale of contracts, the scale of service delivery is too great. So I think in terms of who decides, then I think it is a range of people. There is a role for elected officials, there's a role for public sector officers and professionals, but clearly there's a role for communities and service users. You're only going to do that, you're only going to get that range of views and understand those needs if you get down to a very local level, so that decisions can be made on a local basis rather than a one-size-fits-all basis. So I hope that answers that question. As I say, Susie, if you want to come in with anything, feel free. Otherwise, we'll move on.
I think if we go ahead,
anything more, Luke?
Move on to the next section.
Okay, so we'll move straight on then. Thanks, Luke. So second case study, and this is adult social care case study. It actually comes from the Netherlands, and it was in our original report, Saving Money by Doing the Right Thing. It was referenced in this. But an interesting example, again, about some of the received wisdoms about how you deliver savings and value in those types of public services. So in the Netherlands, as we have in the UK, but perhaps even more in more extreme way by the sound of it, social care was delivered by large teams of people working peripatetically, going in and out of people's homes, the kind of typical 15-minute visit time that we've seen a lot about in the news recently. But this problem in the Netherlands of the fact that people were going in, delivering specialist activity, not necessarily meeting people's needs in an ideal way, and as a result costs were escalating. And so there was a particular organisation that decided to take a completely different approach. They got much more localised. They created smaller teams of up to 10 people working in just one neighbourhood, self-managing, so no need for lots of external management, but they would manage amongst themselves. They would be supported with skills, they would support it to be generalists, so rather than just having very specific skills and functions, they'd be able to meet a wider range of people's needs. And they were encouraged to spend the time that they needed rather than having a kind of, you must be in and out in 15 minutes. And what they found, putting this arrangement in place, was that the costs of each individual visit went up quite significantly, as you might imagine. And the way that the public sector at the moment manages contracts and manage values is about unit costs, and so this would be a disastrous return. But what they also found was, because they were doing the right thing and delivering the care that people needed, the actual number of visits that they needed to make went down by 50%. So the cost of each individual visit went up, but the number of visits that they needed to make and the overall demand on the service went down far more. So overall, it was a cheaper service. But because they were delivering what people needed, patient satisfaction was going up, and also at the same time staff morale went up as well, and staff sickness going down. So it kind of demonstrates this focus on standardization, unit costs, driving down the individual cost of care in this case. In theory, it looks like it makes savings because your unit costs go down, but actually you end up having to do a lot more interventions because you're not doing the right things by people in the first place. Okay. So that's the second case study. So both case studies demonstrate that actually counterintuitively, when you get more local and put people in the driving seat in local area and delivery of services, you can actually end up with both better quality of services and fundamentally cheaper services. Okay, back over to you, Susie.
Brilliant. Thanks, Neil. As Neil mentioned, that we really, think that actually by having locally run and locally delivered public services, they can be better, more cost effective, and really a better service and better outcomes for the people that the communities are working with. There's a couple of things we really would like you to be able to do. We really need to show that sort of groundswell of public opinion that people do want more locally developed and locally delivered public services. There's the address there of our website, as you mentioned, you'll be sending it around in the slides at the end. You can go onto there and pledge your support for locally delivered public services. We've also got just over a week until the general election. So there's also an option there. You can put in your postcode and get a list of your prospective parliamentary candidates in your area. Lots of people have already done this. We're getting quite interesting responses from candidates, and there's some text there that you can send to your parliamentary candidates to really to flag up this issue with them about your concerns for local services in your area and how you'd like to keep them local. We've got 9 days until the election to really hammer home that point to those parliamentary candidates. Neil's also going to talk to you now a bit about what you can do in your own local authority area in terms of delivering and developing more local public services. So back over to Neil.
Thanks, Susie. For the last time, we're nearly at the end, guys. Talking to your local authority, what you can do more locally, not just parliamentary candidates. There are a number of authorities, and I'm flashing some of them up on screen now. A number of local authorities that are starting to move towards a more local approach to service delivery. These are ones that local authorities that we've come across as a result of our research, or people that have talked to us, or our partners, Vanguard, about a move to a different way of working. And what we found with all of these examples and all of these local authorities are making a start at trying to move towards some form of locality working. They're I think in most cases finding it quite difficult, as any change management is. But what's common about all of these organisations is that they've realised that in order to deliver quality public services cheaper, rather than going for extra scale and outsourcing and commissioning, all of these local authorities are thinking about how they can work with their local communities and get things more local, more small scale, using the assets of communities to a greater degree. So I think there's increasing recognition at local authority level that actually the ways of the future are going to be about getting smaller scale and more local to deliver appropriate services. So you might find that talking to your local authority, there are people within the authority that recognise that this is the way to go. There is an opportunity at the moment for people to bid into a programme that the government has been running for the last year, and there's the new round for the coming year just launching. So Locality actually manages this on behalf of DCLG, but the Our Place programme, and the details up on screen, can provide organisations partnerships between local communities and local voluntary sector organisations and local authorities to look at a particular neighbourhood and a particular set of services in a neighbourhood and look at how more localised, locally appropriate and responsive services could be redesigned into the architecture of the local authority. So it's a one-year program, and if you successfully bid into this program, you could potentially get up to an £8,000 grant and some technical support to enable you to talk to your local authority about how to do service delivery differently. So we'd certainly encourage people to think, those people that are interested in the Keep It Local approach, to think about using our place as a mechanism to start those conversations with local authorities. So those are a few ideas just to leave you with at the end of this webinar about what you could do next if you like what we've had to say and if you like our campaign. But we're just going to close off now with some closing words from Luke, but also any final questions that people might have. So Luke, if you want to come back in now, let us know if we've got any questions from the audience, and otherwise just wrap us up.
Yeah, we've had, I'll just feedback one more question we've had. So the question that's come in is that we've seen lots of positive things happening through using the Keep It Local approach, but is there anything negative that people should potentially be aware of?
Okay. Again, I'll jump in and have a go. I think the negative things to be aware of and the barriers to be aware of is that people will find reasons why this approach can't work, and those barriers, those things that they might come up with can be a range of different things. They can be about a lack of understanding, a lack of belief that small scale can be more effective and can be cheaper. In particular, lots of public officials are concerned that smaller scale approach can be more risky. It's putting power and control into hands of smaller groups and a larger number of groups potentially, and they can perceive a risk that with that control going out to a multitude of different organisations at a local level, there's more risk that something somewhere can go wrong. So there's a lot of risk aversion, and there's a lot of barriers. If you want to put this in place, what you're battling against basically is a breaking down of the current received wisdom, the current approach, which is to deal with public services in silos, to standardise things, to scale things. It's so much in the DNA of how the public sector thinks about how to deliver value for money that you can often be swimming against the tide, and you're into classic change management territory, and that change can be difficult and can be time consuming, and you can create enemies along the way, people concerned about what it means about their role. But it's certainly worth doing and pushing through with, and in the end I think the kind of examples that we've had today, there's increasing weight of examples that show that this is the right way to go, and people in the end, seeing is believing. Once they see the value that small scale and local can deliver, then they're more likely to push that change through. So I hope that answers that question. Anything else, Luke?
Thank you very much, Neil. We've just run over time, so there are a couple of extra questions that we've got, but rather than answering those now, I will pass those to Neil and Susie after this session, and they'll get back to those people who have sent in questions and we haven't answered via email. So I'd just like to thank everyone for joining today. I'd like to echo what Neil and Susie have said. If you think Keep It Local is important and you'd like to see it in your area, please sign our petition, which you can find at locality.org.uk/keepitlocal. I'd also like to let you know that we do have other webinars coming up. If you'd like to join them, please go sign up, and you can find those on our website at locality.org.uk/events. And as I mentioned, you will be getting all the slides that you've seen on screen today via email as well. So thank you very much for joining us, and I hope to see you at the next session. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Bye.